Klement Gottwald was a Czechoslovak Communist politician and longtime leader of the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia. He was Prime Minister of Czechoslovakia from 1946 to 1948 and President from 1948 to 1953. Early life. Gottwald was born on 23 November 1896 in Dedec, Wischau, Moravia, Austria-Hungary. Career: a cabinet maker by training, he joined the Social Democratic Party in 1912. He was drafted into the Austro-Hungarian army during World War I, but defected to the Russians late in the war. A charter member of the KSC in 1921, he edited the party's newspaper in Bratislava from 1921 to 1926. From 1925 onward he was a member of the KSC Central Committee. In 1927 he became Secretary-General of the KSC, and 2 years later he was elected to the National Assembly. He became a Secretary of the Comintern in 1935, a post he held until its dissolution in 1943. After the Munich Agreement of 1938, Gottwald spent the next 7 years in exile in Moscow. From 1939 onward he was one of the leaders of the Czech resistance. In March 1945, Edward Benes, who had been elected President of Czechoslovakia 1935–38 and who had been head of the Czechoslovak government in exile in London since 1941, agreed to form a National Front government with Gottwald. As part of the deal, Gottwald became Deputy Premier under Zdeněk Fierlinger. In 1946, Gottwald gave up the Secretary-General's post to Rudolf Slansky and was elected to the new position of party chairman. That March, he led the party to an astonishing 38% of the votes. This was easily the KSC's best performance in an election coup. By the summer of 1947, however, the KSC's popularity had significantly dwindled, and most observers believed Gottwald would be turned out of office at the elections due for May 1948. The Communists' dwindling popularity, combined with France and Italy dropping the Communists from the coalition governments, prompted Joseph Stalin to order Gottwald to begin efforts to set up an undisguised communist regime in Czechoslovakia. Outwardly, though, Gottwald kept up the appearance of working within the system, announcing that he intended to lead the Communists to an absolute majority in the upcoming election, something no Czechoslovak party had ever done. The end game began in February 1948, when a majority of the cabinet directed the Communist Interior Minister, Václav Nožič, to stop packing the police force with Communists. Nožič ignored this directive, with Gottwald's support. In response, 12 non-communist ministers resigned. They believed that without the support, Gottwald would be unable to govern and be forced to either give way or resign himself. Benes initially supported the position, and refused to accept the resignations. Gottwald not only refused to resign, but demanded the appointment of a communist-dominated government under threat of a general strike. His communist colleagues occupied the offices of the non-communist ministers. On 25 February, Benes, fearing Soviet intervention, gave in. He accepted the resignations of the non-communist ministers and appointed a new government in accordance with Gottwald's specifications. Although ostensibly still a coalition, it was dominated by communists and pro-Moscow Social Democrats. The other parties were still nominally represented, but with the exception of Foreign Minister Jan Masaryk, they were fellow travelers handpicked by the Communists. For this date forward, Gottwald was effectively the most powerful man in Czechoslovakia. On 9 May, the National Assembly approved the so-called 9th of May Constitution. While it was not a completely communist document, its communist imprint was strong enough that Benes refused to sign it. He resigned on the 2nd of June. In accordance with the 1920 constitution, Gottwald took over most presidential functions until the 14th of June, when he was formally elected as president. Leadership of Czechoslovakia. Gottwald initially tried to take a semi-independent line. However, that changed shortly after a meeting with Stalin. Under his direction, Gottwald imposed the Soviet model of government on the country. He nationalized the country's industry and collectivized its farms. There was considerable resistance within the government to Soviet influence on Czechoslovak politics. In response, Gottwald instigated a series of purges, first to remove non-communists, later to remove some communists as well. Prominent communists who became victims of these purges and were defendants in the Prague trials included Rudolf Slansky, the party's general secretary Vlado Klementis, and Gustav Husák, who was dismissed from office for bourgeois nationalism. Slansky and Klementis were executed in December 1952, and hundreds of other government officials were sent to prison. Husák was rehabilitated in 1960s and became the leader of Czechoslovakia in 1969. In a famous photograph from the 21st of February 1948, described also in the Book of Laughter and Forgetting by Milan Kundera, Klementis stands next to Gottwald. When Vladimir Klementa was charged in 1950, he was erased from the photograph by the state propaganda department. Death. Gottwald had suffered from heart disease for several years. Shortly after attending Stalin's funeral on the 9th of March 1953, one of his arteries burst. He died 5 days later on the 14th of March 1953, aged 56. His body was initially displayed in a mausoleum at the site of the Jan Žižka National Monument in the district of Žižkov, Prague. In 1962 the personality cult ended and it was no longer possible to show Gottwald's body. There are accounts that in 1962 Gottwald's body had blackened and was decomposing due to a botched embalming, although other witnesses have disputed this. His body was cremated, the ashes returned to the Žižka monument and placed in a sarcophagus. After the end of the communist period, Gottwald's ashes were removed from the Žižka monument and placed in a common grave at Prague's Olszany Cemetery, together with the ashes of about 20 other communist leaders which had also originally been placed in the Žižka monument. The Communist Party of Bohemia and Moravia now maintains that common grave. After Gottwald, he was succeeded by Antonin Zapotecký, the Premier of Czechoslovakia from 1948 to 1953. In tribute, Sedlin, a city in Moravia, now the Czech Republic, was renamed Gottwaldov after him from 1949 to 1990. Zmaiv, a city in Kharkiv Oblast, Ukrainian SSR, was named Gottwald after him from 1976 to 1990. Name St. Slobody in Bratislava was named Gottwaldovo name St. after him. A bridge in Prague that is now called Násecký most was once called Gottwaldov most, and the abutting metro station now called Výsarad was called Gottwaldova. A Czechoslovakian 100 koruna banknote issued on the 1st of October 1989 as part of the 1985-89 banknote series included a portrait of Gottwald. This note was so poorly received by Czechoslovakians that it was removed from official circulation on the 31st of December 1990 and was promptly replaced with the previous banknote issue of the same denomination. All Czechoslovakian banknotes were removed from circulation in 1993 and replaced by separate Czech and Slovakian notes. In 2005 he was voted the worst Czech in a CT poll. He received 26% of the votes.